We are going to build a rover. This is what we are going to make. It has an ultrasonic sensor, it has wheels to drive, and it has a computer in the back. And we will be starting from the beginning and put pieces together one by one and learn how to create our own rover. We're going to start with a chassis plate. Chassis plate is an acrylic plate which is covered with paper for protection against scratches. And what is important to note is the plate has a front or a rear. The rear of the rover is the larger, wider, round part, and the front is the other side. And this side is the bottom of the plate, but it looks pretty much the same as the top of the plate. Well, not quite. There are holes in the front which are shifted towards this side. So if we look at the top of the plate, now I turn this around, if we are looking at the top of the plate viewed from the front, we see that these tiny holes marked here with black marker, these tiny holes are shifted towards the left. If I turn the plate around at the bottom, we can see that these holes are shifted with respect to the plate slightly to the right. This is how we identify what top and bottom is, but the first thing we have to do is to peel the paper off to get a clear plate. Now, it takes some fingernails, and you will take this off, and then we just peel carefully that we don't break it, otherwise we need to peel some more. We peel the paper off the chassis board, and I stop right here halfway through, and then I peel the other side. This is the chassis plate, how it looks like when we assemble the rover. Now remember, the bottom is where the holes, the tiny holes, appear to be shifted to the left when viewed from the front. So therefore, this is the bottom. Of course, I can flip it back. It says bottom. At the bottom of the plate, we will mount the front wheel. The front wheel is this, and the front wheel is mounted with screws, M3 and 5 millimeters long, and we put the screws in there. We take the spacers. These are the spacers, and screw the spacers to the plate. And we need 4 screws and 4 spacers. And the 4th. Now you will be seeing these are the spacers mounted on the chassis plate. The wheel does not fit this way. the wheel fits this way. So what we're going to do is take 4 more screws, the same screws, and we use the Phillips screwdriver. That's a screwdriver with a cross in the front, and we are attaching the front wheel to the base plate. It is a good idea to leave the screws loose at the very beginning, just that they find all their places. And once we have all the screws in, all the screws are in, top and bottom, we are going to tighten each one of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we know this is the bottom of the plate. Let's check. This is the top. So now we can completely peel off the rest of the paper. Remaining pieces. Here we are. Now next we need the wheels, and the wheels are mounted on the motors. These are the motors. The wheels come later. And to mount the motors, we need these motor mounting brackets, which look like this. They are plexiglass pieces as well, and we need to peel off the paper here as well. These are the motor mounting brackets. Now, to assemble the motors, look for the long screws. We need the long screws, and we're going to push from the top the motor mount into one of those slits. We put the other bracket to the outside, and we stick the screw through the outside through the mounting bracket. Now, if you look closely at the motors, the motors have, each motor has 2 wires. But looking at the 2 motors, one motor has the yellow wire on one side and the gray wire on the other side, while the other motor has the two wires reversed. What we want to do is mount the motors with a yellow wire closest to the chassis, which means the motor wires are on the inside and the yellow wire is closest to the chassis. So here we take the other bracket and we move the wires out of the way, and we stick the screw through the mounting bracket, through the motor, and then through the other mounting bracket. So here is the head of the screw, through the outside mounting bracket, through the motor, ending on the inside. This is the view from the top. At the bottom we see the same thing. Now we put a nut, a hex nut, on the screw, which is best done by holding the screw with just one finger and then using a screwdriver to fasten the screw. Again, I leave it loose because we need a second screw, again from the outside, through the outside mounting bracket, through the motor body, through the other bracket, and another nut, and tighten the screw. And now we can tighten it because we have both screws in. Tighten this one, tighten the bottom one, and we have our first motor mounted. Again, the wires are on the inside, not on the outside of the motor. The motor itself faces towards the front. This is the place where the wheels go in a moment. The other motor then will be mounted in a similar way, wires to the inside, and the yellow wire closest to the chassis. Again, first we slide the mounting bracket through the chassis plate. Then we need a bolt, sliding the bolt from the outside through the other mount. Then we slide the screw through the body of the motor, put the wires out of the way, slide the screw through the other mount. Now we turn it around and we attach the nut to the screw, holding the nut with one or two fingers. We look for the other bolt. Screw goes from the outside through the motor body, through the other bracket. The nut is on the inside. And we tighten the screws. Now, first we check all four wires are free. Mine is stuck down here, so I need to take it out. All four wires are free. both motors have the wires on the inside, and the yellow wire is closest to the chassis. Now next we're attaching the encoder wheels. The encoder wheels are black plastic discs on the inside, and they slide onto the axle. The other one slides inside to the axle. So these are the encoder wheels. They, from the top, they have a gap in the chassis plate to be free. Make sure that they are free. This one needs to go a little bit more to the inside. Okay. Next, we're attaching the wheels. The wheels also only slide over the axle. Notice that the axle is actually flat on two sides. We are looking for the flat side of the wheel, and we slide the wheel on. Try to hold the motor and not the chassis. The chassis can break, and with a little bit of wiggling the wheels slide on. Again, make sure that the wheel is clear from the chassis plate, and the other wheel goes like this. Again, I hold the motor and I turn the wheel until I feel I'm in the right place. And now we have a chassis. We have a car. We can drive it. However, that's not our goal. We need more than this. What we're going to assemble next is the battery case. The battery case is for 4 AA batteries, and it has 2 leads, a red and a black lead. And what we want to do is mount the battery case to the chassis plate at those elongated slots in the chassis plate. This is where the screws go, and the 2 wires facing the rear, this is the rear, facing the rear of the Rover. Look for the flathead screws. Flathead screws are flat at the top. Focus. Well, it doesn't focus. Okay, stick the screw through the battery case, hold the screw with one finger, and then slide the screw through the elongated hole, turn it around, and attach the nut to the screw. Again, leave it a little loose for a moment. The second screw goes to the outside on the other side. This is where the 2 screws go. We hold the second screw with one finger, turn it around, and attach the nut to the screw from the bottom. Now, we would like to have the battery in the center, so look for the center, and then tighten the screws. We check the battery case is mounted on the chassis plate at the top, and the wires to the batteries are facing the rear of the rover. Next, we are going to attach the wire guide, which is this S-shaped plastic piece with 4 large holes and 3 small holes at the bottom for mounting behind the battery. The bracket is going to face the front of the rover, which means it is placed right here, and we're going to use these 3 holes in the chassis plate to mount the wire guide. The wire guide has threads. We don't need nuts. So what we need is 3 M3 6mm long screws, which we stick from the bottom through the plate, and then we attach the wire guide to the screw and tighten the screw in there. This is how it looks from the top. This is how it looks from the bottom. We're going to use two more holes. These 2 holes will have 2 more screws. This is the screw we just put in. It's very easy. We get another screw. We wiggle a little bit on the wire guide, and then we can attach 3rd screw. Again, leave it loose for the moment. 3rd screw, like this. All 3 screws are in, so now I'm tightening all 3 screws. From the top, we make sure that the battery wires are free. We didn't clamp them underneath the guide. And now the wire guide is sitting facing the front of the rover. Next, we're attaching the motor bit mount. The motor bit mount is another plastic piece which has a large rectangle here. This is where the motor bit goes. It has a base and a longer stem which we will be using as a mast. The motor bit mount is mounted at those 2 holes. Those 2 holes behind the wire guide. The screws come from the bottom. We find again the M3 screws. Slide it through the bottom of the chassis plate. We get the motor bit mount, and we mount the motor bit mount in this orientation. Note that when viewed from the rear, the mast is on the left of the rover. Also note that the base is behind the vertical piece. I show it from the other side. This is the orientation how we want to mount the motor mount. Now I only put one screw in, it's loose, so it needs a second screw. And we put the screw through the other hole on the other side, slide the motor bit mount over, and now we tighten both screws. Now this is the motor bit mount. Before we can mount the motor bit, this is the motor bit, we will attach power to the motor bit. Power is attached to the blue terminal with two connections. There are two blue terminals. This is where the motors will go later, but right now we will be making the connection to the blue terminal which says ground and VIN. The motor bit is mounted with that very, very wide connector. This is the connector for the microbit, towards the bottom of the rover. What we want to do, this is the rear of the rover, we want to mount the motor bit like this. There are four holes in the motor bit. 1, 2, 3, 4. We are only using the bottom two holes, these two holes, to mount it. But before we do so, we loosen the screws in the terminal using the flathead screwdriver. This is the flathead screwdriver. We loosen them that the top of the screws are flush with the top of the terminal. Then the red wire goes in the VIN port. So we stick the red wire into the VIN, hold it, and tighten the terminal screw. To check if our connection is good, we need to pull a little bit on the wire and see if it comes loose. If it comes loose, you need to try again. The black wire is the ground wire. It goes in the other connection of the terminal. We hold the wire in and tighten the screw from the top. Again, we pull to make sure there is a good connection, and my wires are good. So now we can mount the motor bit. Motor bit is mounted with the M3 screws. We need to slide a screw through one of the holes. The holes are very deep in there. I can't do it with my big fingers. So using the Phillips screwdriver, we stick the screw on the screwdriver, hold the motor bit upside down, slide the screw through the hole, and then we attach the motor bit to the motor bit mount. And we use the second screw through the hole on the other side. This is the hole on the other side. And we have both screws in, so we tighten both screws. And now we have the motor bit mounted with the board side towards the back, with the microbit connector towards the bottom, with the battery wires attached, and I move them a little bit out of the way here, just to the rear a little bit. Next, we want to mount our sonar sensor, which starts first with a servo mount. The piece, which is a bracket with 4 small holes at the bottom, is to be mounted in the front of the rover. There are 2 ways of doing it. You could mount it this way. However, the long side, this long side, needs to be on the right side of the rover. So when viewed from the front, on the right side of the rover is the wider part. We're going to mount this bracket on here. But before we do so, we need to mount on the bracket the servo motor. The servo motor is a rotating thing which has a 3 connection wire. There are 3 connections, and first thing we do is we take the servo arm, which is that cross at the top. We take the servo arm off. We loosen the center black screw. Do not loose the screw. And take and just pull out the servo arm. This is the servo arm. The servo arm sits on a very small gear of the servo motor, and the servo motor needs to be mounted. We need to slide the wire through from the top to the bottom through the big rectangular hole, from the top through the bottom, and then we slide the body of the servo motor through the large rectangular hole in an orientation that the long side of the servo motor points to the short side of the bracket. We slide it all the way in, and we use the smallest screws we have to mount the servo motor on the bracket. We need the smallest screws to attach the servo motor to the servo motor mount. We have 6 very small screws. The longer ones are the ones we put in this bracket. These are the longer screws. We stick them through the servo mount, and we attach one screw. Again, leave them loose. These are self-tapping screws. They screw a little bit harder than the previous screws we have put in there. With the second screw we can tighten it down, fasten the first screw, fasten the second screw, and again remember, this is the right hand side of the rover, and the wire needs to go towards the back. So we pull the wire towards the back, and now we need the M2 screws, which look like the M3 screws, but they're a little bit smaller. We stick one screw through the bracket, Using the Phillips screwdriver, we attach the screw to the chassis in those small holes we used at the very beginning to find the top and the bottom of the plate. Here is the bottom view. So now we attach the other 3 screws. It is a good idea with very small screws to put the screw first on the screwdriver, hold it with one finger, and then you can simply guide it through the hole where it belongs, feel where it belongs, and then simply go through the thread. Stick the screw on the screwdriver, hold it with one finger, put it through the hole, and put the screw in. One more. Now all 4 screws are in. I left them all loose. Now I'm going to tighten each one of them. We have mounted the servo motor mount together with the servo motor to the chassis, and just to be sure, if you check, the center of the servo motor lines up with the center of the chassis. Okay, we put the Rover by the side for a moment because we still have that servo arm which needs to be mounted with a small black screw to the sonar mount, which is a plastic piece with a slot for the sonar, a large hole for the servo motor axis, and 4 mounting holes for those other very small screws which go to the bottom. This is the bottom of the sonar mount, and the servo mount is mounted like this to the sonar mount. Note that the cross is not quite symmetrical. These are longer arms and these are shorter arms. The shorter arms are going in this direction. The longer arms are going across. What we're going to do is to start with the very small screws. Through the they're easy to lose. Make sure you don't lose one of the small screws. We attach them like this from the same side where the hub is, a cylindrical piece on top from that same side, because we're going to mount it flush on the sonar mount piece. This is the shorter arm, so it needs to go here. And the difficulty is to find the hole. you need to feel where the hole is. Once you're there, it's easy. And if you check, you can look through the other 3 holes, then you know you have found the right orientation of the servo arm. 3 more screws. Becomes easier as you go. First through the arm, then we're looking for the hole. Once we found it, we attach it again, leave it a little loose. These are again self-tapping plastic screws. So after having all 4 in, I tighten them. Do not tighten too hard. These are very small screws. Use very little force. Just make sure that the servo arm is sitting tight at the base of the sonar mount. This is what we need to mount on the servo. So inside here is that cogwheel which goes on the servo axis, and you need to find left and right, and then we put the small screw to secure the servo arm back to the servo motor. Try if it moves. That's correct. Again, the sonar mount should be centered with the chassis of the Rover. Next, we mount the sonar itself. The sonar is a board which has 2 antennas. We slide it into the grooves of the sonar mount, like this. And we start with a long wire. We have 2 wires. We have 2 wires, a 10 centimeter and a 20 centimeter wire. We start with the long wire, and it doesn't matter which side, but if you look at it, there are 4 pins at the top, right here. There are 4 pins at the top of the Rover, and the magenta pin, the magenta wire, needs to go towards the left side. So I have it reversed. I need to turn it over, and then I slide all 4 pins. You can do it one by one, but it's a good idea to do it just all 4 together. We slide it down onto the sonar head. Again, check the colors. If you wish, you can look at the Rover from the front. And what we have is the right side of the Rover is the black wire, then there is a white wire, there is a gray wire, and the magenta wire is on the other side, on the left side of the rover. After having this, we guide the wire from the top down, through the first hole of the wire guide, and we pull it through. Then we guide the wire from the bottom up through the second hole, and we leave it there for now, because now we are going to, the wires are only glued together, and what we're going to do is pull the wires apart like this. Pull the wires apart about 3 inches. Pull the gray wire from the white wire, and the white wire from the black wire, so that we have the 3 wires not attached to each other. Then we pull the wires through to about like this, and then we stick again the other end of the jumper wire through the bottom hole in the vertical part of the wire guide, like this. So the wires need to go back, but now they are too short, and the second piece, the shorter piece, is an extension which we now use with the male part. These are the pins of the male part, and make sure you have the right series of the colors. We mount again wire by wire. If you can do it, do all 4 of them together, which means you have to group them all together like this, and then push them all the way in until the plastic covers touch each other. It should look like this. These are the wires attached, and again we check magenta to magenta, and black to black, white to white, gray to gray. So from here we pass on the inside of the mast, and we attach 3 wires. We attach 3 wires. Think about the wire routing. It shouldn't be too crowded. We attach the magenta, the gray, and the black wire to pin number 16. Pin number 16. This is on the left side of the rover. It is the 3rd row from the left. This is where we attach. However, we need to twist around. The black wire is at the top. The gray wire the gray wire at the bottom, and the magenta wire in the middle. So let me repeat that. The black wire at the top. The next is the magenta wire. You need to change the order. And the gray wire is at the bottom. And then I turn around and I plug this into pin number 16. All 3 together. You can practice. It's much easier to do all 3 together than to do one by one. Next, we take the 3-wire connection to the servo motor. This comes from the servo motor. It goes around the battery, and it's a good idea to not leave it loose. Let's feed it through the front hole of these rectangular holes toward downward. Pull it through. And then the last of the 3 rectangular holes, we come up again. That will keep the wire out of the way and down. We can help it a little bit with the screwdriver if the fingers don't do. Don't put tension on the wires. And then we plug the connector for the servo motor into the motor bit in the next row. That is pin 15. So that goes in pin 15. The black wire needs to be on top. This is the completed servo connection. What's left is the white wire from the sonar now goes into the bottom, into the blue part of pin 14. So completing the sonar connection is plugging the white wire from the sonar into pin 14 of the motor bit in the blue pin of the motor bit. All right. Now we are ready to test if the motor bit actually works. Let's put the batteries in. We need 4 AA batteries, which go into the battery holder. And batteries have polarity. Every battery has a plus at this side of the battery and a minus at the flat part of the battery. The flat part always goes where the spring is in the battery holder. So you see that the springs in the battery holder actually are alternating. There's a spring next here and there's a spring here, so the batteries go one way and the next battery goes the other way. This is the flat part of the battery, which goes where the spring is. And number 4, the flat part of this battery now goes this side. Now we have power, and check if the switch, if the bottom switch down here is in the 5-volt position. My switch is in the wrong position, so I need to push the switch to the right to the 5-volt position. And there is a second switch up here on the motor bit, which is the on-off switch. It is off. Let's turn it on. What you should find is a red LED right here on the motor bit should come on. Nothing else should happen. Red LED on, I can confirm my power connection to the battery is a good connection. Turn the motor bit off. What we haven't done yet is we need to connect the motors. We still have loose wires at the bottom, and what we're going to do is each of the motor wires are to be fed through the chassis board through the large hole right in front, this hole here, in front of the motors. We feed the 2 wires of the right motor through the chassis, both together. Do not pull on the wires, only slightly. And the other motor wires go through here. Again, feed them through, don't pull hard. It should be easy. So now we have the wires at the top. Next, we need to twist the wires. Just twist the two wires around each other. Fairly tight, but it doesn't have to be elaborate. Twist the wires together. To the very end. Here is the other motor. Now we start with the left motor. Let's look again at the Rover. This is the front, this is the rear, this is the left side of the Rover. So we want to start with the left two wires twisted together, and we just lead them around here, and the motor wires are to be connected at the blue terminal, which has 4 connections. Before we make any connection, we use the slotted screwdriver and back out the screws until the screw head is flush with the top of the terminal block. We start with the left motor, and the left motor gray wire goes at the bottom of the blue connector. We pull slightly to ensure we have a good connection. The yellow wire is going at the next connection at the block. So we connect both wires of the left motor to the bottom 2 connections of the terminal block. Now we take the right motor wires, and again, if the wires come apart, twist them together. This is stranded wire, they should be together. And the gray wire comes next to leave the space for the yellow wire at the very top. Again, we check, and we made the motor connection. You will notice the wire for the right motors is too long. I will simply fold it and put it down to make it a little bit more neat. You also can make it go down here and make it go down there. Now we're almost finished with the assembly of our Rover. What is missing is the microcomputer, which is the microbit. Take a microbit. The connections are on the golden side of the microbit. This is supposed to go into the terminal of the motor bit board. So slide it in, support the motor bit with your fingers on the other side, and push until you see that the holes are actually, those holes in the microbit, they are actually partially inside the connector. you can feel it. It slides in and it stays in, and it is fairly well also mechanically connected. So now we have a computer. What is missing is we still need to attach our Rover ID number. The Rover ID number is attached to the mast. And what we're going to do is use the remaining 2 M3 screws. We slide the screw through the hole, and we use the Phillips screwdriver to attach the number to the mast. The second screw, and we tighten the 2 screws. And we completed the assembly of our rover. Here's the front with the sonar on the servo motor, the front wheel, the motors with the wheels. We have the battery, we have the wire guide, which contains the wire between the sonar and the motor bit. The motor bit is the vertical board in the back. The microbit is there, and if we have a program loaded, then we can simply turn on our rover